There's a cruel paradox built into the heart of human existence. One Arthur Schopenhauer saw clearer than most. The more deeply a person thinks, the heavier life begins to feel. Because the ordinary mind is content with routine, with chasing what others chase. But the intelligent mind, it suffers in a world obsessed with surface-level achievements and empty discipline. Schopenhauer once wrote, "The person who writes for fools will always have a large audience. And perhaps, by extension, the one who lives for them will always be applauded for a life of rigid schedules and predictable days." But here's the unsettling truth modern psychology is beginning to confirm. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that individuals with higher IQ scores tend to be less physically active and less bound by strict routines. In fact, intelligent people were more likely to sleep irregular hours, resist imposed schedules, and prioritize reflective solitude over collective habits. It's not laziness. It's not rebellion. It's a deeper awareness. A recognition that life's meaning isn't found in ticking off a to-do list or in the pride of waking up at 5 a.m. And so, we arrive at a difficult, misunderstood question. Why is it that truly intelligent people, those whose thoughts run deeper, whose perceptions cut sharper, often seem uninterested in conventional discipline? Is it arrogance? Is it weakness? Or is it, perhaps, a kind of wisdom the rest of the world refuses to understand? Today, we'll unravel this together. Not as an escape from responsibility, but as an invitation to see discipline, not as the world has sold it to you, but as it really is. And in doing so, perhaps you'll recognize parts of yourself you've been made to feel guilty about for far too long. The illusion of discipline in modern culture. We live in a culture that worships discipline. It's everywhere you look. Books telling you to wake up at 5 a.m., run 5 miles, journal your gratitude, and eat the same green vegetables at precisely the same time every day. Success, we're told, belongs to the most controlled, the most efficient, the ones who obey a rigid order, who follow schedules like soldiers marching in perfect time. And for many, this becomes a religion, a set of unwritten commandments. Be productive, stay organized, hustle harder, sleep less, never pause. But here's what no one admits out loud. Most people hate it. They resent the routines they force upon themselves. They grow restless inside the very cages they built to feel secure. Because discipline, when applied blindly and externally, becomes a kind of invisible prison. And for intelligent, reflective minds, that prison is unbearable. Schopenhauer understood this better than most. He believed that much of society's discipline is performative, a set of behaviors we adopt to appear acceptable, to prove our worth to others. He once said, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone." In other words, the moment you start tailoring your life to meet the expectations of a system, a routine, or an audience, you begin losing yourself. And perhaps you've felt it too. That quiet frustration, sitting at your desk at 6 a.m. because some best-selling book told you successful people do. That sense of emptiness after a day packed with perfectly executed habits, yet none of it touching your soul. This isn't laziness. It's your deeper self, the intelligent, thinking part of you rebelling against the illusion. Because discipline, in the way modern culture sells it, promises control, but often delivers suffocation. And in that suffocation, many quietly suffer, believing they're defective because they can't stay inside the lines drawn by others. Yet what if the issue isn't you? What if the problem is the lines themselves? The true nature of intelligence and inner freedom. Most people mistake intelligence for the ability to collect facts, recall data, or win arguments. But true intelligence, it lives somewhere deeper. It's not about how much you know, but how deeply you see. It's the ability to perceive the invisible patterns beneath ordinary life, to sense the hollowness behind rituals, the futility in mindless striving, and the tragic comedy of a world addicted to appearances. And this is where intelligent minds begin to diverge from the crowd. While others chase structure and order like it's salvation, the reflective mind chases something else entirely: understanding. Not how to fill their calendar, but why we fill it at all. Not how to discipline every hour, but what makes an hour meaningful. Schopenhauer believed that the more intelligent a person is, the less patience they have for petty obligations. He described ordinary life as a kind of theater, with most people dutifully performing their roles, husband, employee, neighbor, follower, without question. But the intelligent mind? It grows weary, not because it's arrogant or lazy, but because it sees the performance for what it is. It feels the absurdity of rushing to meet deadlines no one will remember, of enforcing routines that no longer nourish the soul. It yearns for a kind of inner freedom that no schedule can provide. Modern research has begun to echo what Schopenhauer intuited long ago. A study published by the British Journal of Psychology found that highly intelligent individuals tend to be less socially active and more drawn to solitary, unstructured environments. And if you look at the lives of highly creative innovators, from Steve Jobs to Nikola Tesla to Virginia Woolf, you'll find one thing in common: an aversion to rigid schedules. These individuals didn't live by hourly planners. They lived by the pulse of their own curiosity. And in doing so, they discovered a different kind of discipline. One that wasn't forced upon them by the world, but shaped by the quiet laws of their inner world. It's not the absence of order, it's the refusal to be shackled by meaningless ones. The conflict between discipline and creativity. One of the most dangerous myths modern cultures keep selling is this: if you want to create, if you want to achieve, if you want to matter, you must submit yourself to strict discipline. Early mornings, bulletproof routines, endless lists, every hour accounted for. But the truth, the uncomfortable, unmarketable truth, is that rigid discipline often kills what it claims to protect. Because discipline, when misunderstood, doesn't just manage time, it strangles the soul. You see, creativity isn't a loyal servant of order. It's wild. It's unpredictable. It lives in the unexpected. It appears when the mind isn't burdened by deadlines and to-do lists. And if you're honest with yourself, you already know this. Think back. The moments in your life when you felt most vividly alive, were they planned? Were they on a calendar? Or did they arrive suddenly? A conversation at 2 a.m., an idea in the shower, a long drive with no destination, a sudden realization while staring out of a window? Those weren't scheduled. They happened because your mind was finally free. Free from the noise. Free from the performance. Free from the suffocating weight of doing everything right. Schopenhauer warned us about this centuries ago. He believed that the will to live, this blind, relentless drive to strive, achieve, and accumulate, is one of the greatest sources of human misery. It traps people in endless cycles of ambition, where every achievement births a new anxiety, and every structured day becomes a link in an invisible chain. And intelligent people, those who think deeper, who feel the unbearable weight of existence more intensely, recognize this for what it is: a trap. They see how mechanical discipline, endlessly glorified by modern society, doesn't lead to wisdom. It leads to exhaustion. To a life so packed with tasks that there's no room left for reflection, for wonder, for questions that have no immediate answers. Modern studies even confirm this. A 2020 report in Frontiers in Psychology found that individuals with high creative intelligence demonstrated lower adherence to daily routines and a greater tolerance for ambiguity and unpredictability. It wasn't because they were disorganized. It was because their minds needed space to breathe, to drift, to gather unseen connections between scattered ideas. And perhaps you've felt it too. That ache, deep down, when you realize your best thoughts don't obey office hours. That quiet resistance you feel when another motivational speaker tells you to grind harder, while your inner voice begs for stillness. Listen to it, because that resistance isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the reminder that while discipline can build an efficient life, it can also build a shallow one. And what the intelligent soul seeks isn't just a life well managed, but a life well understood. The conflict between discipline and creativity isn't new. It's ancient, and it asks us to choose. Do we want to be machines of routine or creatures of thought? And in that question lies the first taste of real freedom. Why intelligent people build inner discipline instead. Here's a truth no one likes to admit. Discipline isn't one thing. It comes in two forms. And knowing the difference can mean the difference between a life of quiet frustration and a life of genuine freedom. The first is external discipline. It's the kind the world loves to glorify. Wake up at dawn. Follow the planner. Obey the clock. Stack your habits like bricks. It's visible. It's measurable. It makes for neat social media posts and best-selling productivity books. But for intelligent, reflective minds, this kind of discipline often feels oppressive, because it reduces life to a series of checkboxes, a sterile existence where every hour is pre-assigned and every impulse is suppressed for the sake of efficiency. And when those minds inevitably fail to maintain this rigid routine, frustration sets in. Not because they're weak, but because they were never meant to live by someone else's clock. And perhaps you've felt it, that gnawing guilt when you can't stick to a morning routine. The self-loathing after another planner sits untouched on your desk. The silent fear that you're falling behind because you can't mold yourself into a machine. But here's the part they don't tell you. The most intelligent, fulfilled people don't rely on external discipline. They master internal discipline. Inner discipline isn't about managing time. It's about mastering your thoughts. It's about knowing when to say no, not to the world, but to your own restless impulses. It's about creating clarity in your mind before trying to create order on your calendar. Schopenhauer, in his ruthless honesty, taught that the highest form of human freedom lies not in perfect routines, but in detachment. Detachment from endless striving. Detachment from the desperate need to control every outcome. Detachment from the illusion that if you can just structure your day perfectly, your mind will finally be at peace. He wrote, "A man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills." Meaning you can choose your actions, but you cannot always choose your desires. And so, the truly wise don't waste energy trying to suppress every impulse with rigid routines. They build the kind of discipline that happens in the mind. The discipline to decide which thoughts are worth feeding, which desires deserve attention, which battles are even worth fighting. It's a quieter, lonelier kind of strength, but it's the only kind that leads to peace. If you've struggled to keep up with the culture's obsession for external discipline, you're not broken. You're simply wired to seek meaning over mechanics. And in the end, that will serve you far more. How to heal the modern mind from the tyranny of productivity. There's a kind of quiet sickness in the modern world, a relentless obsession with productivity. Every book, every podcast, every influencer seems to whisper the same command. Do more. Be faster. Stay ahead. And slowly, without realizing it, people begin to measure their worth by their output. But the human mind, especially the intelligent, reflective one, wasn't built to exist as a machine. It was built to wander, to sit with uncertainty, to entertain conflicting thoughts, to follow curiosity down unmarked roads. And the first step toward healing this restless, overworked mind is simple though rarely practiced. Acceptance. Acceptance of your natural rhythms. Some of us think best before dawn. Others find clarity at midnight. Some ideas arrive in the middle of a crowded cafe, while others need a long walk in the woods. To force yourself into a pace or pattern that isn't yours is to wage war against your own nature. Schopenhauer understood this. He believed that solitude wasn't an escape from life, but the only place a person could truly meet themselves. He wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom. Because in solitude, without the noise of comparison or the pressure of performance, we remember who we are. We remember that it's not what we produce that defines us, but what we notice, what we feel, what we quietly carry inside." Ralph Waldo Emerson, another mind who rebelled against society's mindless busyness, once said, "Nothing can bring you peace but yourself." And Henry David Thoreau retreated to the woods not because he was weak, but because he knew it takes immense strength to step away from the world's constant demands and listen to the quieter voice within. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop chasing productivity for its own sake, and instead honor your own natural pace, you become more creative, more insightful, and far more at peace. The mind, like the seasons, moves in cycles. It needs periods of activity, yes, but also periods of stillness. Moments of intense focus, followed by afternoons of aimless reflection. And it's in those empty spaces, those unstructured hours, where meaning begins to grow. where the most important realizations, the ones that can't be scheduled, quietly arrive. So if you've been exhausted by the tyranny of productivity, let it go. Not forever, not recklessly, but enough to reclaim the parts of yourself you abandoned for the sake of keeping up. You don't owe the world constant efficiency. You owe yourself the chance to live differently. Takes courage to live differently, to loosen your grip on the routines you were told would save you, to step off the conveyor belt of endless doing and simply be. Because in a world obsessed with discipline, structure, and control, choosing a quieter, slower, more reflective life is a radical act. And yet, it might be the only sane one left. Schopenhauer, in his unflinching honesty, once wrote, "The greatest achievements of the human mind are generally received with distrust." And perhaps that's why choosing to measure your life not by how disciplined you appear, but by how free you feel, makes people uneasy. But that discomfort is a sign you're on the right path. A path shaped by your own spirit, your own rhythms, your own quiet wisdom. So, if today you needed permission to stop chasing someone else's idea of discipline, here it is. You were never meant to live by a restless world's demands. You were meant to build a life that makes sense to your soul. And sometimes that means choosing creative chaos over rigid order, solitude over applause, depth over routine. In the end, wisdom isn't about how well you obey the rules. It's about whether you had the courage to question them. And I hope you will. And before we part today, tell me what's been quietly weighing on you lately. Which untold struggle would you want us to untangle next?